Welcome again to episode 3 of Hara and Josh talking about hot button issues. Today, white men, stereotypes, and empathy, and compassion and understanding. Hara and I were talking about topics to cover before hitting record. I started to describe the pattern that it comes up in a few minutes into this recording that you'll hear that the recording's based on. She lit up in the way that someone who has thought about something and has something to say about it does, and so we picked stereotypes of white men and how we react to it and what it means, how people feel about these things. I think we both thought right off the bat, I hope I don't get fired, but I think we also felt, how can we learn if we don't speak? The number of threads that we couldn't follow greatly exceeded the ones that we could, but if you like controversy, I think you'll like this one. On a personal note, you'll hear my views and questions evolve over the course of just this conversation. It's more than an hour, but even that was enough time for me to realize the things. I think you'll hear it happening as I speak. The questions I asked her about trying to understand what it's like to be blamed for things that you suffer from, I hadn't explored before. And between recording with her and recording these words that I'm saying right now, I've continued exploring this thread with other people, with friends and others. And I've discovered a lot about myself and my experience that I've never, it's like obvious, but I've never noticed before. And others have shown surprise at something meaningful under their noses that they never noticed. A lot of this I credit Hara for her supportive non-judgment, her patience, her bringing me into the Psychology Today context to explore this in. So let's listen to the conversation. Welcome to Hara and Josh talking about controversial topics. This is Joshua Spodek. I'm here with
Hara Morano.
And we're in the Psychology Today office. This is episode number 3, I think. And I came in here and I said, I got a topic that's controversial. And you had a look on your face when I described it of, that might be a little too controversial. Maybe it's not controversial enough, we'll see. But then once we started, you were like, I want to, you had something to say. And I was like, let's talk, let's record it.
Right.
Are we ready to jump in?
Ready to jump in.
Should I describe it to on the recording how I did with you?
Yes, and what made you think of it and how you come to it. Yes.
Oh, what made me think? Okay, here's what made me think of it. I consistently have people over for famous no packaging vegetable stew. So I cook a lot of dinners for people, and I'm very happy that it's delicious, more delicious than ever before when I was cooking with packaging. It's more convenient. And it's more accessible, meaning someone who lives in a food desert can eat this way. It costs less money, costs less time. But consistently, people keep saying to me, yeah, it's all well and good, but you don't know what it's like to live in a food desert as a single mom with 3 kids and 3 jobs you got to hold down. And it's as if they're not seeing what's in front of their faces, that this is cheaper, it's more convenient, it's more accessible. And I felt like if I'm consistently getting this, maybe it's something about me. And I thought maybe people have some preconceived notions about me for some reason. And so I think about people's preconceived notions. And if I think we judge people, I think it's automatic. I've access only to my own mind, not to anyone else's, so I can't tell how other people's brains work. But it seems to me that we involuntarily, when we hear or see someone's skin color, or their sex, or their sexual orientation, or where they're from sometimes, we think certain things about them, stereotypes. I offer as evidence, many big comedians make jokes about these things, and if they made things that didn't connect with something inside people's heads, no one would laugh, but people do laugh. And when I go online and look for lists of stereotypes, you can find some pages that say, here are some stereotypes by gender, here are some stereotypes by skin color, here are some stereotypes by whatever. Usually I would describe negative. Even the ones that people might describe as positive are still like not so pleasant. They dehumanize. Most of them are about not straight white men. I happen to be a straight white male. But it occurred to me, people must have automatic thoughts when they think about me. But when I look them up, I don't really see so many. And so I thought to ask people in my life, what do you think, what automatic thoughts come to your head when you hear or see straight white male? And I found that people don't answer. And I mean, they'll say something like, you probably went to a good school or something like that. And I'm like, okay, I can see why you might say that, and I try to get more, and I don't really get more. Although people also, it's hard for people to talk about this. I think they're anticipating getting in trouble. And so I proposed talking about this, partly because, actually it's funny, when I talk to other straight white men, things open up in conversation that I read off of them, oh my God, I can't talk about this, and now I can talk about it. And I presume that when people of other people who are in the same groups get together, they also talk comfortably. This is nothing new, but I've been trying to ask people, like, what do you think when you think straight white male? Are there stereotypes? If there are people aware of them? If so, what are they?
So, I would take the conversation back a step, because you're right, everybody makes a judgment when encountering another human being. And there's this really sound reason we make judgments. And this is part of the most primitive part of our mental operations. And the judgment we make, and I'm sure animals of all kinds make the same judgment. When you're encountering a stranger, whether it's walking down the street or whatever situation that you're in, you're automatically making a judgment. Is that person intending to help me or harm me? That's judgment number one.
And that's not voluntary, right?
It's not voluntary.
We do it, but we don't try to do it.
It's a survival mechanism. And there are probably thousands of cues that we use to make the judgment. I can't index them all, but clearly a smile on someone's face is going to be a major cue. I don't know that straight white male or gay white male, or I don't know that those are the index features, the primary index features. When I'm walking down the street and I see a stranger, my first judgment, or anyone's first judgment, is going to be help or harm. Am I safe or not safe? That's really the fundamental judgment. And from there, I think tons of other judgments are possible, and I think they probably depend on one's situation in life. If someone's a woman of dating age and who's looking for a partner, she might be cued whenever she encounters a male to do a quick index, almost involuntary, of things that she sees in males. I don't know that straight versus gay, I don't know where that fits on people's radar assessment judgment. I'm not sure that there is a single stereotype of straight white male. There is in certain kinds of maybe social situations, but I think that's several steps down and several special circumstances down the line. But I agree with you. I think we make these snap judgments. They're automatic judgments. Some are based on experience, but they are stereotypes. And I'm going to disagree with you slightly on the fact that, on whether they dehumanize. Stereotypes are absolutely essential mental shortcuts. We have stereotypes of everything, and they dehumanize to the degree that they dehumanize everybody to the degree that they strip away individual features. You're making summary judgments for survival purposes. And yes, people make all kinds of other judgments beyond that. I don't know what the index of features is that people that are aroused in one's stereotype repertoire. I'm not sure. Skin color is in every circumstance an index feature of what of my judgments, my automatic judgments, first stop. I'm not always so sure that enters into it. But we use stereotypes. Everybody uses stereotypes. They're shortcuts. They cut off all the nuance. They cut off all the edges. And we have to use them because our brains need that economy.
You're describing it on the user side. So I
Yes.
see someone and I think, first, friend or foe. And then within that, I think, okay, maybe some more nuance in there. But if someone does it with me, well, if I do it with someone, they might know, they're doing it with me too. It's
They
inevitable.
have to, yeah.
How we act on it is another story.
Right,
That to me is the big thing, how we act on it.
right.
But
Or how you use that information. It's like, okay, I have this basic information. I'm safe. I could be in a situation where I deepen the engagement with that strange human being.
so if
If that person were to drop something, I might make the judgment that person is a safe human being. I'm going to stop and help pick up something that person dropped, and it might lead to an encounter. I'm not doing it to lead to an encounter, but I judge that person is a safe enough person for me to have some kind of engagement. If I judge that person wasn't a safe person to engage with, I might not pick up what they dropped and just move, right along on the street.
there are a lot of things. Now, we live in a time that is very difficult to talk about race. Well, difficult for white people to talk about race.
Difficult to talk about money,
And-
income, race, lots of things.
So I was looking up, so I have to quote others on racial stereotypes, for example. So Dave Chappelle has this hilarious routine. I find it funny where he says, he's like, do you ever get in a situation that's so racist you can't even believe it? And he talks about, he was in the South, I think, walks into a restaurant, walks up to he's like reading the menu behind the counter, and he says, I'd like and the guy behind the counter goes, chicken. And he's like, and the guy, it's in the South, so the white man behind the counter looks at the black guy and says, you want chicken? He's like, I do, but I always thought it was because it tasted good, but I didn't know it was because of some genetic predisposition. And then later he's like, and I guess I'll have some watermelon, I think. And the guy's like, I guess I'll have some, and the guy's like, watermelon. And so this is a stereotype. Blacks like chicken and watermelon.
Right.
Then Larry David had a routine where he's talking to some guy who's a lawyer. His last name is Berg. Happens to be Swedish, but he thought he was Jewish.
Uh-huh.
And so that's a stereotype. Jews, good at law.
Right.
And when you're in the group, of course, you can say the things that you can't when you're outside of the group. And when you're a very famous comedian, a lot of what they can do is talk about these things. I'm bringing these up because I guess to say, if I walk up to some black person I've never met and say, I bet you like chicken, that would be trouble. But there's a lot of people
It would also be stupid.
But there's a lot of people who believe that. Now, the thing about the dehumanizing, I don't know how particularly dehumanizing that may or may not be, but when David Chappelle says it, the whole audience laughs a lot,
right.
And they book him for future shows, so people seem to like that, hearing that. But if someone said...
Because he's describing the way stereotypes work, and particularly that particular racial stereotype.
So another racial stereotype, I believe, I'm not going out on a limb here, that some people think that blacks are better at basketball than whites.
Yeah.
That's
right.
a stereotype.
Right.
And if someone said, you're good just because of your skin color, that's what I mean by dehumanizing. Someone works very hard, you don't get to the NBA.
So what they're doing at that point is making assumptions about things that are really not necessarily critical at a first meeting.
Well, that's a matter of politeness, but even if, how would you like it if, another stereotype I saw written up on these lists, I don't have them like all in my head, but one of them was pretty women sleep their way to the top, or pretty women have it easier.
Right.
Would you like someone to say to you, the reason you're where you are is because you're female and you're pretty and that's what got you promoted?
Yeah, I think a lot of us have had that said to us. I remember the first time I got my job promotion.
And
yeah, someone said that to me.
Did that feel dehumanizing?
Not only did it feel dehumanizing, it was said to me by the person in that organization who had the greatest reputation for being the greatest liberal. And I just found it hilariously amusing that the person who was supposedly the least biased, most liberal human being felt perfectly comfortable relating this gender stereotype. It was a total insult to me, but I thought it was hilarious that someone who had this reputation just automatically resorted to this stereotype. Maybe because he didn't like me. I have no idea whether he did or didn't.
Well, how do you contrast what you said earlier about it was automatic on the person's part?
I don't think at that level. I think there are some that are automatic. I don't know that. I think it differs for lots of people as to what degree of interaction they're still using stereotypes to negotiate the social scene.
Well, I think not everyone knows that they're using a stereotype. I think a lot of times they've thought this way for so long, they never thought any differently, and if it's a very common stereotype, they might not know any different.
Well, I'm gonna broaden that and say most people aren't aware most of the time of what and how they're thinking about most things.
Yeah.
So it would also be true about other people.
He might not have been choosing to do what he was doing. He might have just never occurred to him otherwise, and never saw evidence to the contrary that it was a stereotype. I mean, if I said men tend to be taller than women, I don't know if that's a stereotype. I think the data seems to back it up.
Yeah.
And I certainly see women who are tall. Some women who are taller than some men, but
Right,
on
right.
average, men
If
are taller
you
than
know the
women.
law of averages, you know that men tend to be taller on average than women, although there's a substantial overlap of men and women in height, and we all know women who are taller than men.
The way that we are just now talking about differences in height between men and women,
Right.
he might have thought that about, I don't know, ability to navigate a corporate hierarchy. That it might have felt to him exactly the same. And it's possible that somewhere there's a continent that we just never came across where the women are taller than the men. Okay, it's not really possible, but you could imagine that
Right.
there might be some genetic thing that happens and suddenly the women start growing tall and the men start growing short, and suddenly...
Go to the Netherlands.
Yeah. Well, the things that men are still taller, but the women are taller than me.
Right. Taller
many of
than
them
most people, yeah.
So my point is that we have these stereotypes. The case that you were talking about, that's what I was trying to illustrate. That's a case where I think you felt dehumanized, even though he might have been doing what you said is just automatic for all of us.
I felt more than dehumanized. I felt totally insulted that my talent wasn't being recognized as the source of my promotion. Mm-hmm. So I was really deeply insulted. And I think somewhat later, I reacted to the idea that he might have been operating on a stereotype. And the dehumanization part of it was a later, more nuanced reaction. My first reaction was I was being insulted. Mm-hmm. And that, wait a minute, this grand poobah of wisdom was making this comment about me. The irony of it was deafening.
What would you have preferred? How would you have preferred he see you?
I would have preferred that he said congratulations, and that...
Actually, can I ask a slightly different question?
Yeah, ask it different.
If this was the result of an involuntary, automatic thought, what should he have done about it?
He could have said, I didn't really mean that.
I mean, before he said it. So if he's got this automatic thought that he says friend or foe, and then maybe he's got this automatic stereotype that says women don't. I'm guessing maybe he thought women don't perform as well in a corporate environment.
Or he could have been thinking in a way that he couldn't even articulate and maybe wasn't aware of, oh, I wonder whether at some point my job will be threatened by a woman.
Wait a minute. Okay. That may be, but earlier you were saying it's automatic, it's natural, it's the way we work that we make these snap judgments. There's no problem with that.
I'm not saying all of them are automatic. I'm not saying that they're all of the same character. We make certain automatic judgments that relate to our safety.
Mm-hmm.
I think that there are other judgments we make that are far less related to safety, far less related to survival, that are based on probably faulty information that people have and maybe have been taught. I don't think everyone makes the same judgment that that guy did of me.
It's a common judgment of probably less now than 50 years ago.
I was about to say, this was a while ago.
Okay,
I do not think that many people would make the same judgment now. I don't even think they would think it.
At the time, he was making a judgment that was to some degree automatic. He was making it, and are you saying we all make judgments like that?
Right.
Okay, you've made judgments about others in slightly different ways, but of the same nature. You've simplified another person.
Right.
And you've...
Right, into one feature, becomes a stand-in for the whole, right?
He's doing something that I think you agree is pretty common. I don't mean the specifics of what he...
Right,
of,
no.
of his
what
thoughts.
he's doing is common. That's, a stereotypical reaction. And many... So you're getting an interesting point, which is that many of them are experienced automatically, okay? They occur before we have a chance to think about them.
Mm-hmm.
Many of them, not all of them. Some of them are really, truly, deeply ingrained and, there are these automatic judgments, safe, not safe. And then there are whole others that we've learned along the way in our lives, depending on the specific circumstances of our lives. But lots of mental processes feel automatic in which we can intervene and learn to intervene.
Here's my question to you, and I'm leading to another question too, is if his mind did something very human, involuntarily,
right,
and that led to him saying something, to communicating to you in a way that you felt you didn't like.
right.
What, after the thought and before the behavior, what should he have done? What could he have done?
He could have kept his mouth shut.
Then he would never learn. I think, I put to you, he
I'm
might
not
never learn.
entirely sure. I think that the culture was shifting at the time and that he probably would have learned in some way. So here's another aspect of it. And this may be an even more important aspect of it. He felt entitled to say whatever came to his mind.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that everybody feels entitled to say whatever comes to their mind. I will bet that you, Josh, do not always feel 100% entitled to say whatever comes to your mind in any circumstance, regardless of its effect on another human being.
Of course not. That's why I have to quote comedians to talk about racial stereotypes.
Right.
Because if I said it myself, then
right.
We live in a time, you were saying earlier how like this liberal guy was being sexist. And I'm like, in 2020 United States, liberals have as much sexism and racism and lots of these things as
they like, sure do.
Yeah. And so I'm like, I feel like there's another time when it wasn't that way, but that's not my world. That's not this world right here, right now.
Yeah.
All right. So we've established, we all do this. It's a human process.
Right.
Maybe there's some listeners who are like, I don't. Well, maybe they don't. But at least you and I feel that
If they
it's
think
automatic.
through every single experience, every minute of every day,
Let's grant
I'm not entirely sure they're going to have time to do everything.
I agree. It's just, I'm sure someone's listening to me like, I've never thought that way. All right. I just don't want to.
Let's grant them.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Let's grant that. Then
We applaud you.
Then to be on the receiving end of some of these, no matter how much we do it ourselves, when we get it, we don't really like it. It can be really frustrating.
Or it can be flattering. It can be frustrating. It depends on the nature of the stereotype.
Yeah. Now, so that means that people have an automatic judgment of me. And you were saying earlier, women get judged. Women are used to being judged. That was
Right.
before we hit record. And what are some judgments that you've been on the receiving end of that you have liked, not liked, whatever?
Okay. So, if you're cute, when you're 25, people make all kinds of judgments. If you happen to have a shapely body and have big breasts, people make assumptions and judgments of you. You get teased a lot. I believe that was a source of my friend's automatic judgment.
Mm-hmm.
Smart women get judged automatically. You're in a meeting. Someone who doesn't know you, hasn't interacted with you, makes a judgment based on something you say, will have suddenly a stereotype. Been on the receiving end of those. All kinds of things. Being Jewish, laughing loud. There are just all kinds of judgments that are made. But I will say this, for the most part, and I'm sure you've had this experience, despite the and feelings of automaticity of these kinds of responses, most people, when they stick around to have more than that just passing non-interactive judgment, when there is some interactions, the information about that person gets updated pretty quickly.
They become an individual.
They immediately become an individual, and the brain is racing to update all the information about that person.
So you've been on the receiving end of judgments, and it sounds like some of them you really didn't like.
Yeah.
And then now, if I'm going to say a series of identities, and just, I bet if I say black, Hispanic, Asian, gay, straight, probably people listening to this probably had quick identities, quick things that popped in their heads about each of those. And probably some of them, they were like, well, that's the way it is. And some of them, they were like, ooh, I better not say that one.
Uh-huh.
So I could have asked you, what do you think when I say X? And you probably wouldn't want to say it because you could get in trouble for it. I'm not going to get in any trouble. Well, okay, but there is going to be one.
Okay.
Straight white male.
I have benign.
That's what everybody says. Like, you don't think thief?
No.
You don't think...
First of all, you have to realize I'm the mother of 2 straight white males.
Uh-huh.
So grown straight white males. So my most intimate experiences with straight white males have been pretty positive.
Mm-hmm.
So no, I'm not thinking thief. That wouldn't even occur to me. That wouldn't probably be in the first 50 adjectives, descriptives to come to my mind.
And do you think good at sports? You might not think it, but it's not like
neutral.
Uh-huh.
It's not an index feature of straight white male in my lexicon of straight white males.
And there are other groups that you might associate that with. You don't think, you might not think right off the bat, or would you or would you not think right off the bat, probably a good dancer?
No.
And
But again, dancer, good, bad, wouldn't enter into my lexicon, nor would it, trust me, with a black male. But I know there is that stereotype, and comedians make jokes about that stereotype all the time.
and audiences laugh in
Yes,
large numbers. Yeah.
because we know that we laugh because it's true, and it's called us out on this.
When you say true, it's that automatic thought happens.
It happens, and we know it has happened, even though we don't individually subscribe to it. We all know that that is a fact of life, that some people have that stereotype.
How about going back to straight white male? How about probably a good leader?
That's not part of the package of attributes that I carry around with straight white male. That's not part of the stereotype package.
How about wants to lead?
No, that's not an index feature.
Okay.
It's just,
Now here's something that, how about probably suffered a lot?
no, that would not be an index feature.
Is that something that other groups might have? Maybe not a lot, but
I
like
don't
has
know.
suffered, has that,
It's hard for me to understand what elements might be being referred to by that.
has had difficult things, has had to overcome struggles, has had to struggle to overcome challenges.
If I saw a straight white male limping, I might think that, or with one arm, yes.
Well, okay, well without that, just straight white male on its own.
No. It's not part of the package of features.
Are there other groups that you might think, oh, they probably had to struggle?
Not automatically. It would be based on elements of how they look, but not on the person itself. How are they dressed? How
Once you add in
distressed
extra
they
stuff,
seem.
once you add extra things in, behavior and dress,
Yeah.
then you're talking about something else.
That's not part of the automatic package. No.
Okay, and privileged.
I don't know that it would. I'm more apt to think automatically that white males of all kinds are privileged, but I don't know how automatic a feature that is in a sudden encounter with someone. Again, that would be based off other secondary elements of a person. That would not be an automatic adjective. No.
So
Privileged.
I think a lot of people think that they also have benign, not really stuff about straight white male. But I think that's not the case. I think it's not like there's a part of the brain that evaluates automatically everything but straight, everything but white, everything but male.
Uh-huh.
I think the judgment is probably just as significant, but I think people are less aware of it.
But see, here's the thing. I do think that we live in a culture where straight white males, or white males, I don't necessarily.
So let's just restrict to white male.
Males have been privileged. But that, and I really believe that. I know I am the victim of that, as most women are, some more than others. Grew up in a family where that was part of the structure. And I'm really very sensitive to it. I don't know, though, that's an automatic thought that goes through my head when I meet someone. I don't think it's an index feature that's part of my stereotype of white male.
I think that the way...
I'm not sure. I mean, maybe if you were to show me lists of, 200 adjectives, I could...
Does anything come to mind? I mean...
I'm trying to think.
Okay.
I'm rummaging through my brain.
And do you also think, is it plausible that we prejudge or automatic thoughts just as much about white men as we do about any other groups?
Oh, yeah.
And the magnitude is just as great. The stereotypes that form are just as great. But I think people don't recognize it. And when they say, but we live in a world in which white men have been privileged,
Mm-hmm.
how is that different than saying we live in a world in which black men have been criminals?
Wait. Have been criminals or been criminalized?
Criminals.
I would say more of them have been locked up.
Have we lived in a world with... I don't know the numbers. I think that black men probably commit more crimes than white men.
I'm not sure that they commit more crimes. I think they are punished more than white men for whatever crimes they do commit. And I think that's pretty well established by fact.
All right, so I guess if you...
But if I were walking down the street and I saw a white guy with huge muscles, I'd be scared shitless. Am I allowed to say that on your podcast? Yeah. I'd be scared shitless.
This is my podcast. This is our show.
Yeah, right. So, I mean, there are other elements that are part of, a stereotype.
So here's some experiences that I've had that I believe evoke in me feelings like when the guy said that to you about that your appearance got you your position.
Right. Yeah, sleeping with someone.
So I think that when people hear about accomplishments of mine, they think, well, you're privileged. You could do it when others couldn't. Very dehumanizing.
I imagine so. And it takes away whatever struggles you had and whatever work you did.
That's another thing that if I tell people, but I've struggled, there is nothing I've found that I can say that they will not respond to me back. You haven't really struggled.
Yes, I know.
You think that you have, and when I tell you the reality of the world, then you'll realize that you thought you struggled, but you're so privileged that you don't really know what struggling means.
Well, we happen to live in a moment of history in our culture right now where trauma, victimization are enshrined and only certain people are allowed to get the glory that we assign to people who have had those experiences. It's really warped. It's exceedingly warped. And
that may be, but I don't want to talk about politics. I want to talk about psychology here.
Okay.
Because it's really easy to get into that, and let's table that
But that is psychology. Our psychology these days is to make assumptions about who has been traumatized and struggled and has had to struggle, and to accord them certain privileges.
Is it possible that the view of white men is that they're privileged, and that where it comes from? And so when people say we want to equalize things, we want equality, that it feels like it's coming from a place of justice and producing fairness, but could it be coming from a place of this prejudice?
Wait, so say it again to me, if I want to follow all the elements of this. So
let me give you an example.
Okay.
When this guy said to you what he said,
right,
you got here because of your attractiveness.
Right.
That was coming from a part of his mind that said women are this way. And it wasn't justified, but he had that thought. and you would have preferred he just stayed quiet. But if you asked him, did this come from a preconceived notion? He would probably say, no, this is how women are. Just like you and I might talk about height.
Mm-hmm.
When someone says to me, Josh, you're privileged, I think they probably think it's coming from the same place he thought it was coming from.
Right.
Because
right.
they think Josh actually is privileged.
Uh-huh.
But could it be that it's actually coming from the same part of the mind that said, you're a woman and you don't do things well, so if you're succeeding, it's because of your appearance.
Right.
That could they be could people be acting toward white men? I'm overgeneralizing. Could be people talking toward me based on a preconceived notion that's just like similar to how the guy treated you.
I think it's a more complicated answer. I mean, because I think that in part it's based on experience. It's based on someone's personal experience. I think it's based on... The short answer is yes, okay? The short answer is yes. With 9 million dependent clauses.
Did you go to law school?
No.
Because I'm thinking that there's when no one has said to me, Josh, in the context of...
Wait, let me just say something.
Uh-huh.
10 years ago, I don't think anyone would have made that assumption. I don't think that would have been an index feature. Oh, Josh, that's because you're privileged. I don't think... We wouldn't even been talking or thinking in those terms. I'm glad that we are. To be honest with you, I'm glad that our culture is understanding that we've automatically privileged some people, but they're making a mistake in generalizing, in going from the general to the particular. And I think that's what you're trying to get at.
I think everybody who's listening they're chomping at the bit, being like, Josh, you don't understand. You are privileged. And I think...
because you're white and male.
Yeah. And that's the association that they have. And there's nothing that I could say or do that they won't be like, yeah, you have had those struggles, but really you're privileged. And I think it's really powerful. And I think a while ago people would say, look, if you succeeded at something, it's because of your appearance. That's just, look, we live in a world in which women can't succeed except by looks. And if you succeed, it was because of your looks. And you'd be like, up yours.
Yeah.
I worked hard to get here. And they'd be like, yeah, but you're pretty. And that'd be very frustrating. And you know that given time, they'd be like, she worked hard. She learned a lot. She did a lot. She swam upstream and things like that. And you'd hope that they would get that in their lifetimes. But it'd be really frustrating to feel otherwise. And I think that may be happening this way.
I agree.
Well, that was easy.
But I think it's all evolving too.
So I think it's really... I don't think people... It's just
a moment in history right now where we're extremely conscious of some things, and I didn't react with anger. I was annoyed with the guy. It didn't change my behavior. I was very amused at the irony. That was my big reaction. As it is, how many years later? I mean, we're talking, a long time later,
mm-hmm.
many decades later. And, I'm glad that we're talking about automatic privilege, and I think there are some situations in which some people are automatically privileged, as are people with money, as are people with, to a degree, white skin has been privileged, and I think that's an awareness that people are reacting to.
See, I think people,
blonde hair has been
I think people are
privileged.
really quick to say what you just said, and that if what you said earlier about times changing, I think very soon people would look at what you just said and be like, I can't believe she said that.
I'm sure that
Because
that's the case.
I think I've told you, like, I've been mugged. I got mugged like 5 times. I got mugged at knife point. I got mugged with a large rock in my face. I got mugged by a group of kids, one of them waving a wrench in my face. I got punched in the face one time just waiting for the bus in broad daylight coming home. To have a weapon that could take your life.
Right.
And someone say, you're privileged. And, and if I say something like, I've run a bunch of marathons. No one took any step at all of those marathons for me. And I bet a lot of people are like, yeah, well, it takes a long time to train and you had the time and other people didn't have that time. Or if I say I got a PhD in physics and it's really hard.
You had the luxury.
Right. Everyone's like, yeah, more privilege. It's like everything I say, people turn into privilege.
Right.
If you switch whiteness or maleness out of me, suddenly they say, wow, look at what you've done. You're a hero.
Right.
You've run all these marathons. You suffered from you got all these muggings and you still lived through it and you're still a happy person. People are like, wow, that's amazing. And with me, I think they're thinking, of course you're happy, because all those things, they don't really count.
Right.
And it's really, I think, and so when I think people say, you don't know what it's like to live in a food desert where you're taking care of, right? I'm like, that sounds like my childhood. I wasn't a single mom,
right,
obviously.
But it's parallel.
Yeah, it's like there were all these. I remember pouring food out and the cockroaches in the food because we had a clean house, but it's like when you live in packed tight, all in a tenement. It wasn't tenements. It was a pretty rough neighborhood in Philadelphia. It still is.
Uh-huh.
And I'm like, no, not one of the people who has said this, who has said, oh well, you're privileged. Or they don't say you're privileged. Not one of them has started with a question of, have you experienced this yourself?
Right.
The only now I was at a potluck dinner, sitting next to a random person. I'm talking to her for a bit. She's a single mother with her son there.
Uh-huh.
And she lives in the Bronx, not full on food desert, but not right by Union Square to get the farmer's market stuff. So I say, we talk a bit. I say,
by the way, the expensive farmer's market, stuff at the farmer's market isn't necessarily cheap. It's very high quality, very fresh, very good.
This is
and
where
I'm all for it.
My food is cheaper. Well, all right. You got to know how to meet.
Yeah, you go at the end of the day and you can get great bargains.
Yeah, there's ways to get bargains. You certainly buy in season.
Yeah.
If you buy out of season, like all the hothouse stuff, the greenhouse stuff, it's expensive. Yeah. I buy the stuff that's in season. I buy the head of kale that's bigger than me. It's like $2.
Yes.
And right now, I'm not getting greens. I'm getting a little bit of cabbage.
Uh-huh.
Anyway, so there's definitely ways to shop and save more money at the farmer's market. Anyway, so I invite this woman to my place for my famous no packaging vegetable stew. Her reaction? She invites me to go up to the Bronx to cook at a potluck that she's scheduled there because she wants people there to learn what I'm doing because it's more helpful for them.
Uh-huh.
All these people who are saying to me, you're privileged and you don't understand.
But she took the moment.
When push comes to shove, the person who's actually it would help is this would help. These people think that they know better than I do. But the actual, they themselves are not the single mother in the food desert.
But it isn't just the stereotype that is in the way. Because this woman sitting next to you, whatever stereotype she might have had, and you might have had, you took the opportunity to get into the particulars of your life enough to know what you cook, certainly.
Yeah, she came over and I cooked the stew for her.
Yeah, but she knew enough to know that she could come over to your place and that you were going to cook something. So at that point, the two of you were into some of the details so that the stereotype was discarded.
My point was I'm not talking about her judging me. I'm talking about now. People say to me, your stew sounds great if you're privileged and rich and you can get all this super expensive vegetables.
Right.
But this other people can't.
But what I'm trying to say, Josh, is that this isn't a problem of stereotypes. It's people people wouldn't say, might have that as a starting stereotype, but the minute there were a conversation, they would discard it and engage in the conversation and know that there are particulars.
Wait, hold on.
We
Let me
happen
see
to-
if I understand. What you just said, are you talking about the people who come over, not her, but other friends and
people
colleagues
in
of mine?
general.
When people come over and they say to me, you don't understand what it's like. Your food is nice for you, but you privileged person, but you don't understand what it's like for others who suffer. Is what you're saying applying to them? I think that
No, it's not applying to them.
it feels to me like they're judging me and they think that I don't understand things about life. And I couldn't because I'm so privileged because of my being straight white male.
But they're holding on to the stereotype way beyond its point of utility, way beyond the point, because we live in a culture that's encouraging people to hold on to that as a identity, as a way of punishing other people, as a way of, they think, elevating other people. So we're engaged in this craziness, I think, that's not allowing people to drop the initial stereotypes they might start out with.
I think that they're not dropping it because they're not aware that they think that they're saying men are taller than women on average. When they're but when they say,
but if I talk to you for 5 minutes, I might have been one of those people who made the assumption, based on a variety of things, where I met you, what you do, what your job is, that you're like, I would say in a category of privileged male, okay? But I know you. I know some of the struggles. I know some
these
of...
people are saying it after they've...
This no longer is monolithic here. You're a person...
These people are saying it after they've been in my place for dinner. It means they're saying it after like an hour.
Because they're encouraged, because our culture at this moment encourages people to hold on to that belief. It's a belief that's rewarded in some circles in our culture right now.
You said earlier punishing. I feel like there's a punishment in there too. I feel like there's a self-righteousness of like...
There's a punishment because you've been so damn privileged.
In their minds.
In their minds, yeah, not you.
Because none of them have asked me,
that's the
what
point.
are your struggles? And if I do tell them,
they're dismissed.
I've had this experience, they're like, you haven't. And they start getting really condescending at that point.
Right.
So I don't even go there.
Of course.
Because it's like, I don't like being condescended to.
Yeah.
And I think that,
my struggles have been greater than your struggles.
And you have not struggled. You
Right.
don't know what it's like. In fact, the more you think that you have, the more evidence that is that you haven't.
Right.
Oh my God! Can you imagine if you had?
You can't win. You can't get it. It's a bind that you're put in.
Now imagine, have you ever had that happen to you?
Off the top of my head, I can't think, but yes, there are probably certain circumstances where that's happened to me.
I want to speak loosely here. I may have never felt otherwise.
Really?
It is my experience
Uh-huh.
that if I say that I have suffered, I don't mean like I stubbed my toe,
Uh-huh.
but if I've suffered as a white man,
Right.
the response is, actually, this is why you caused suffering.
Oh, yes, right. People who have been damaged do damage to other people. That's the heuristic that they're working on.
If I say I worked hard, people will tell me this is how you didn't have to work hard.
Right.
If I say
They nullify everything because...
More than nullify.
There is...
If I say I've had problems, they say, no, you are the problem.
Of course.
Imagine you lived in a world where every time you said you had a problem, people said, no, you are the problem.
Uh-huh.
And the more that you tell me that you think you have a problem, the more you don't realize you actually are the problem. I can't say what my problems are. I just simply have to suffer in silence.
Right.
Now, people might say, well, you have more access to money, you have more access to politics or things like that. imagine you never were accepted for your problems. And every time you said you had a problem, people said, no, you're the problem.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not saying this hypothetically. Imagine
No,
it.
I know it's happening in our culture at the moment. It really seriously is.
I think at the moment, I think centuries.
I don't know.
I'll say my entire life. I've never known it otherwise.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm sensitive to that because I did an article in which I interviewed males as a category, males, independent of being white or not. And I can tell you that all men are feeling devalued at this moment through various stereotypes that men are bad, they're rapists. They're just rapists in waiting, all of them. And some categories of males, like white males, and of course straight adds an extra layer of privilege onto that.
Perception of privilege.
Yeah, perception of privilege.
There may be actual, but there's definitely perception.
Yeah, and of course we know it's not true, but
I don't think people know it's not true. I think people are like,
a
that's
lot
really
of
the case.
people know it's not true.
Okay,
But the
there's-
vocal ones who are dominating the culture at the moment really
of the suite of preconceived notions that apply to white men.
And by the way, this is not just in people's minds. Let us be honest. And this came up a lot when I did an article about it. And I interviewed guys. I just put out a call to talk to guys, and I spoke to many varieties of guys. Straight white men feel that they are last on the list right now for the goodies that the culture is handing out. In that, they are last on the list of people to be interviewed for job openings.
Yeah, the government assistance for scholarships for
Right, they're last on the list.
Yeah.
And they're feeling it.
So
and white males in particular feel, and they understand where it's coming from.
Hold on. Okay,
but,
where it's coming from, I think a lot of people, I think everybody, if you ask where it's coming from, they're saying we're trying to fix the problem of history.
Right.
Coming from these white men who created the privilege and abused it.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe there's some of that. But I believe there's also, we look at white men and we think privileged. And that's coming from the same place as if we see a black man and think good at basketball.
Yeah, similar place, yeah. Uh-huh.
And people don't realize it. They don't realize that they're blind to seeing the suffering. They can't see it.
Oh, they're blind to seeing all the details.
It's just like
the suffering being one of the details.
The man some time ago couldn't hear you make a great argument or make a great business case. Couldn't hear it.
Right.
He's just thinking, oh, how pretty she is.
Right.
And I think right now people are thinking, people are listening to me right now and they're thinking, he is so ignorant. He doesn't realize how privileged he is.
Right.
And they can't imagine what it's like. Pick any group that's not white men and say, has this group suffered? You can think yes in some way.
Mm-hmm.
Now, think white men. Has this group suffered? Now, because we're speaking thoughtfully, you will say yes, of course. But the gut feeling
is not. But yeah, I don't know that. I think that's a common stereotype. Again, at this moment in history.
I'm not. Yeah, the point that I'm trying to make is that people don't
but it
recognize.
Comes from exactly the same.
And they don't think it is. They really think it's They think it's 100% coming from history.
Right.
And 0% coming from preconceived notion.
Right. But by the same token, I mean, I have trouble subscribing to the Me Too movement. I have trouble subscribing to it because it's too broad a brush. It's too big a stereotype. All men are rapists or rapists in waiting. I can't buy it. I can't subscribe to it. I think there are an enormous amount of successes, excesses, and a lot of damage done to individuals, to some individuals. A lot of damage has been earned. I mean, the Harvey Weinsteins of the world are heinous people. But there are lots of others who get assumed to be in that category.
I don't want to get...
But it's a similar thing.
This experience of...
It's similar to white men are privileged, and you can't get out of that box.
And I want to get to... White men are privileged is like saying black men are thieves.
Yeah, right.
Or pretty women sleep their way to the top. But we recognize that about the others. But I also want to get to, imagine that if you every time you brought up a problem, you got attacked for it.
Mm-hmm.
Certainly from a man's perspective, when women bring up a problem, they get supported. Men often get asked, well, what'd you do to cause it?
Wait, women get supported now. That did not happen 50 years ago. You couldn't even bring up a problem. Seriously, no one listened to women. I've seen it. It's happened over the course of my career.
So let's just say in our lifetimes.
Mm-hmm.
In my lifetime, if a woman says, if a woman has an eating disorder, people want to help her.
Right.
If a man has an eating disorder, I don't think people even recognize that it could be the case, and they're like, "Well, fix it." That's like it seems to me like, or if a man complains about if a woman complains about her boyfriend, it's like, "Oh, this is trouble. What should we do about this?" If a man complains about his girlfriend, it's like, "Well, what'd you do to cause that?" What if I can't think imagine if you brought up a problem, you got blamed for it.
Yeah, no,
what would it do? How does that affect you?
It could make you angry. It depends partly on your nature, partly on, it's infuriating. And that's how women have felt. I don't feel, and I know a lot of other people feel the same way, I don't feel that the adequate payback for that is to put straight white males in a box and blame you for every problem and to disempower you the way we might have been disempowered. Yeah, I don't feel the solution is to disempower you and to disqualify your suffering.
I think people think that they're reacting to that and acting on that, but I think that it's possible. This, as a scientific, I put this out as a hypothesis, that they think they're trying to rectify the past, but they're actually acting on the same thing.
I agree. That happens. It happens in marriage. It happens in all kinds of social relationships where you repeat the damage.
That's not what I'm saying. They're not repeating the damage.
They are. They're repeating what was done to them.
They think that they are. What I'm saying is that they're acting on sexist, racist. Racist part of the brain is saying that person's privileged and has never suffered.
Right.
But they think that they're rectifying a wrong.
Sure.
But they're actually doing the same thing.
Repeating the same.
They're not because kids who are beaten by their parents are more likely to beat I'm not saying that effect. I'm saying there's a part of the mind that prejudges and says that person is privileged. And they're acting on that, but
they're locking down on a stereotype even more.
It's coming from the part of the mind that it's not coming from the part of the mind that's saying let's fits history. That's the later rationalization of it, but it's actually coming from, I know that person better than they do. They're not an individual, they're a white man.
Yeah, I think it might be coming from a lot of places, but that's certainly one of them.
And they're totally, I think most people are unaware of that. This is what I'm playing around with.
I see it with my own eyes. So, and I hear it from young men, particularly.
Yeah, and I guess I'm looking for empathy.
You deserve empathy.
Everyone does. I'm not saying whether they deserve it or not. I guess I'm looking for
No, what I said it because I know that you have suffered, and in no way would I disqualify that. And I understand the broad sweep of that stereotype and how disempowering it is to be in that situation.
I believe you.
Uh-huh.
It also sounded academic the way you said it. It didn't sound like you explored your feelings and conjured up those feelings.
Oh no, I'm totally living in the feelings that I felt and that I could feel. How does it feel to be a woman and not heard all the way through? I don't want to get into specifics, but I experienced it at the beginning of my career and it hasn't ended. Now I have a lot of accomplishments in between and a lot of recognition, but those things still happen to women. So I can feel how frustrating it is because I've had similar kinds of disempowering experiences, if not exactly the same one.
I can't speak for anyone else. It feels like, I think this is something that takes more time to really explore. I mean, I can't really imagine what it's like to walk down the street. Oh, I can, I guess, when I was a kid. But to be weaker, my understanding is that men are more victims of violent crime, but we protect women more. There's no Violence Against Men Act. But it's hard for me to imagine in most interactions, what if someone was stronger than me? I mean, there's plenty of men stronger than me. There's a few women stronger than me. But it takes work for me to figure out, what if it's like, walking down the street, anyone could attack me. I mean, if any of those men, if I was a woman, any of those men chose to attack me, they would win.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't really explored that. That's kind of very uncomfortable for me to feel that way. I don't have to try to figure out what it's like if every time I say that there's a problem, someone's like, that's because you're privileged. It's really annoying. And when I've had conversations like this several times over the past several weeks. And very good friends of mine were saying, you sound like a white supremacist.
Get out of here.
They were like, you got to, I mean, I wasn't saying exactly like this. This is refined compared to that.
Really?
Yeah, they're like, you be really careful the way you say this in other contexts.
But they're saying it as an ally, like, wait, this is how it could come off to other people?
Yeah.
Or they're saying, this is how you sound to me.
They were saying, I know you, so I know what you mean.
Yeah.
But those same words heard by someone else, someone might hear white supremacy.
Yeah, that one never entered my mind, so maybe I'm out of it. But I wouldn't put anything past. I just think we're living in really weird times where these insults are weaponized and lobbed against people. If you say anything that...
See, including against white men, and I think people don't get that.
No, I
They
totally...
feel like it's lobbed everywhere.
But not...
But at men, we're trying to get against white men, we're trying to get justice.
So it may interest you to know that...
Let the record show a devious look in her eyes. And not mischievous, I should say.
No, the editor-in-chief and I have had many conversations about this.
Mm-hmm.
And we both feel exactly the same way. And both feel that men are, and I'm not limiting this to white men, but men are having a rough time in our culture right now.
I think many people would agree
and
with that.
And I feel tremendous sympathy for them.
I think what's missing is the viciousness of the attack.
It's vicious.
And the non-recognition, the hiding of ignorance. Like, I'm not attacking them, I'm fixing the problem.
Right.
This is really, to me, this is a subtle point. It's, say...
You're voicing, you're naming something, and you get attacked for... You're disempowered on that topic before you can even provide your solution.
And then and then you bring out the solution, and people say, no, this is more evidence of the problem.
Yeah.
And this, to me, there's something novel in here that I've never heard. To me, it's novel that I've never heard. What you're saying, I agree with. I've seen this too, but I think there's something nuanced to what I'm bringing in here.
No, it's just the degree of disempowerment.
And self-righteousness on the other part.
Yes.
That people feel very justified, and so they dig in deeper.
Right.
I don't think that came out in any interviews with the men.
This did not exist throughout history. I think this is something specific to this moment in our cultural history.
I'm not going to touch history. I don't want to go into that. Maybe not. I have no idea. But how long has it been, by the way?
I have no idea.
We're at 70 minutes in.
Oh, okay.
And we should probably wrap up.
Probably we should. I don't think we're going to solve the problem. It exists, and.
So what's your statement of the problem?
Well, I mean, there is a stereotype issue, but to use your terminology, your opening terminology of stereotypes, I agree that my statement of the problem is that this is how I would frame it. It may not at all be how you frame it. We're in a moment in our cultural history where we're aware of injustices such as across the board disempowering women, to use one example. And one of the cultural responses has been to validate retribution, payback, one form of which is to accuse males, and especially white males, of having always and now always operating from a position of privilege, which disqualifies them automatically from having a say because they do not understand the pain of other people.
Now let me see if I can state the problem as I see it.
Uh-huh.
One is that you were describing, but I have to comment on yours.
But it's partly because we validate pain as, this culture, it has cultural currency.
You said the word payback, and I think people feel like it's payback, but I think it's actually racism and sexism. And
well, I think the racism and sexism feed into it. It's a gendered payback. So that
it's not. Okay, I'm just going to say this. What you're describing as payback, I believe I think it feels like payback, but it's actually if white men had not been privileged in any way, they would still do the same thing.
I don't think so.
I think
this is a historical development. I don't think it's just automatic and.
I think when people say white men are privileged, there's an element of saying black men are good at basketball.
I'm not disputing that. I'm not disputing the mechanisms. I'm not disputing the mental mechanisms at work.
Okay, so now I'm going to state the problem as I understand it.
Okay.
I think that, as we started at the beginning, I think we have a part of the mind that judges, and it's involuntary. And if you don't really pay attention to it, you don't really know it, but if you get it, then you start realizing that you judge people a lot on things that have nothing to do with them as individuals, but based on skin colors, based on gender, based on where they're from, things like that. And we recognize it very clearly when we do it with many, many groups. But with white men, we don't recognize it. But they're just as strong. And people, I think, will look at one And people, it's just as much sexism and racism that dehumanizes white men, but people recognize it with every other group, but they don't recognize it with that group. And they also, I'm going to throw in something that they look at power structures in Europe and places where Europeans have set up power, and they say, they substitute that benefit that benefited some people. They ascribe that to everyone. Even people who have had no benefit from that at all. And what I'm talking about is support, acceptance, love, understanding, empathy, compassion.
Mm-hmm.
I think that they are, because let's just say every white male has economic, political, cultural privilege. Let's just grant that.
Mm-hmm.
I think that they're missing that we deprive them en masse of these of empathy and compassion and understanding and listening, and to discount that is, well, it's ignorant if people don't get it.
It's ignorant,
and
very ignorant.
And
to make
unconscionable and incredibly mean if people know it. Politically, I think it gets demagogues elected, mm-hmm. because all they have to do is say, I understand you. And someone who craves understanding will go with someone who says, I understand you, rather than someone who says, well, you're actually part of the problem, even though you have had no privilege. Mm-hmm. I'm thinking of someone, you grew up as a coal miner, your grandfather was a coal miner, everyone's been coal miners for as far back as you can remember, and someone says, you're privileged, and the other one says, I'm going to help you. And so I guess it's this feeling of understanding, this feeling of if I share my problems, I'm blamed for double the problems caused to someone else.
You don't even see, because you don't even see.
Yeah, it's dehumanizing. And my close friends say, be careful, if you say that to the wrong person, they're going to think you're a white supremacist.
Wow, that's
both my parents are Jewish. And they say you might be called a white supremacist. This is our world, and I think it's just completely missed. I'm jumping on you because you keep saying things that are like very close, but not exactly.
Well, but see, I think the mental mechanisms are the same as with all stereotypes, but I think there's an additional layer in that at this moment we privilege certain feelings of anger and retribution and payback that won't even allow you to say that you suffered or that you have certain feelings, and that has not always been the case. Well, not that we haven't made stereotypic assumptions about males before. When there used to be the assumption that men don't really have feelings of love. Women do, but men don't. Mm-hmm. I mean, I think that's changed over the last 30 years. Men like sex, women like love. I mean, that's been the stereotype.
I had a girlfriend, and I gave her a book on...
And I think now we know that men love more than, at least as much as women.
I had a girlfriend, and this was years into our relationship. Uh-huh. And I gave her a book on a male perspective on things. And she went to NYU. She's got,
degrees.
A woman of the world. Yeah. And she said, do men have emotions?
There you have it.
And I was like, what did you think otherwise? She said, I thought you just did stuff. And I thought,
I'm sorry for laughing.
How easy it must be to hurt someone when you think that they don't have feelings.
Yeah.
So I don't know what it was like 30 years ago, but I know what it was like, that was like 5 years ago.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. That's someone who,
And I was like, no wonder she didn't like totally break my heart. I mean, we broke up. But I was like, some things fell into place. I was like, how could someone do that? I thought I misunderstood her. But I guess if you think that someone's not going to feel bad about something, then why not do something because they're not going to feel bad?
wow.
I think there's a lot of people who feel that way. A lot of women who feel that way, I guess. And probably men too. If you're not in touch with your feelings.
I'm not shocked to hear that. Oh, yes, I am shocked to hear that from an educated woman. I would imagine that it was a much more common belief 50 years ago, unless you were in a very close relationship. Men were not encouraged to be vulnerable or display their feelings. But things have changed to a large degree, and certainly within relationships. But that is pretty surprising to hear it from an educated woman, even just 5 years ago.
Should we wrap up?
Yeah, why not?
How'd you like this one?
Good. I mean, there's a lot to chew on.
Yeah.
My God, do men have feelings?